We acknowledge that the sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. I'll ask for a motion for approval of the agenda as posted. Moved by Courtney, seconded by Jeff. All in favor? That's carried. I'll ask for disclosure, adoption of minutes for the May 11th meeting. Hope everyone had a chance to review those. Moved by Courtney again, seconded by Lindsay. All in favor? Thank you, that's carried. I'll ask for disclosure of monetary interest. I see none. So we're really excited and grateful to have Rob Eves here today. Rob is the CAO for CareBridge Community Support. I think everybody here is familiar with CareBridge, and we've been very fortunate to have Jeff with us through this entire journey, both with the Housing Task Force and of course now the Housing Advisory Committee. And I invited Rob to be here today largely so we can talk about some of the challenges and the realities that even not-for-profit housing providers face in the development of new, affordable, regular to-income housing within our communities. And we're extremely fortunate to have this commitment by CareBridge to bring a new development to 44 Chambers. And we know that will be extremely meaningful and beneficial for the 28 or more families that will be housed there. And we know how important it is for people to live in a home they can afford. And when it's rent geared to income, we know that that's as deeply affordable as possible. So Rob has had a lot of experience here, and I think your journey through this most recent project, the partnerships, the support you're able to receive from outside organizations, of course, and not just financial, but the guidance along the way. So looking forward to Rob discussing this and giving us some insight. I think that we all need, especially as we all are committed to trying to ensure we can do all we can to make sure we have more affordable units within our community. So Rob, the floor is yours. I don't know if you have a presentation or to share or whatever, but anyway, all yours.
Thanks, Sean. Don't have an actual PowerPoint or anything. I did make some notes, and I'm happy to have people just jump in if you have questions. Really just sort of collected my reflections on our most recent project and a previous project that we'd undertaken just when I joined CareBridge. And I sort of collected kind of 4 or 5 kind of main points of consideration when you're undertaking a project, with the understanding that not-for-profits largely are going to be the ones who will have to, in many ways, try to carry the banner for affordable housing, only because it's not a largely attractive market for anyone else to be in, because it is really not a profitable venture. And that's one of the things I'll speak to later, is that it's not just getting the building built, it's actually continuing to run them and keep them in good running order over long periods of time, which can be a challenge as well for this type of housing, and which has also led to some perceptions around affordable housing in communities where people haven't, owners and operators have had challenges keeping up with that piece. But let's sort of start from the beginning with one fundamental piece of this, is that the demand for affordable housing continues to increase at a rate that far surpasses not only the existing supply, but the even planned sort of developments in this area. We're way behind. I don't even have statistics that could give you a good understanding of that on say a national level, but on a local level, I can let you know, for instance, that there's about an 8-year wait to get into affordable housing just in Lanark County. There's over 800 people on the waiting list. Supply again is quite limited. And the 44 Chambers project is an attempt to help ameliorate that to a certain degree, and I think it will definitely have a significant and ongoing impact, but at 28 units. So you can understand in the larger scale of things, that's still just a small chunk of what we really need to get to. What really makes this possible is what's the fundamental piece that has to be in place that before anything else comes is actually what I would call sort of a fertile environment for the development. And that means we need a supportive community. Just because the community needs affordable housing doesn't mean it's necessarily a fertile environment for that. If, for instance, if individuals who live in the community are resistant to the development of affordable housing in their own backyard, if you will, I'm sure you all are familiar with the NIMBY syndrome and the piece of around perceptions with respect to affordable housing, that can be a significant challenge. We, fortunately, in Smith Falls haven't encountered that, and in fact have had a great deal of enthusiasm. But it's not the same way, even across the county. So just to be clear, even when there's a need, it doesn't necessarily just happen in a community just because the need is there. You need the community to actually be at least supportive, if not actively involved. And the actively involved piece, and again, kudos to Smith Falls, to Sean, his leadership, as well as the municipality and the staff there. And I can see Carl down here on the screen. I can't say enough about, and the council as well, about what that means to this. That's actually fundamental to the longer term picture of a development. Not only do we need the support right now of council, but we need ongoing commitments to make this happen. So as Smith Falls has made, and even before this project came along, it made a commitment to tackling this issue. It's come up with very specific recommendations that help to create that environment that I'm talking about, that makes it a more viable environment to create affordable housing in. So things like tax abatement, things like waiving fees or lowering fees, all of those bits and pieces make up a huge difference, because the margin on these kind of projects is very tight. And so every little bit does actually make a huge difference. So that fertile environment is central. If you don't have that to get started, then you might as well start looking elsewhere, because you're not going to have the fundamental pieces that you need to actually get the project even started. And so 44 Chambers, as an example, started specifically as a conversation between Carebridge, Sean, and another community partner, St. John's, who's actually a partner in the 44 Chambers project and has donated $500,000 to the project. And that was just confirmed recently, so I can talk about it publicly now. But we're very, very pleased by that. But that was actually not Carebridge necessarily hunting around for this opportunity. It was the community that came to us with our experience to say, do you think you could see your way to doing something here? We have an interested partner, and that's where the conversation started. So that's what I mean about fertile environments and people who are thinking about this in a creative way. Second element to this is, and Sean already referred to, is, and again, just to be clear here, I'm not saying anything that you guys are going to go, oh, that I would never have thought of that. I've sort of just tried to put it together all in a bit of a package, but I'm sure you all have a good awareness of these various elements. Is a strong committed partnership. So just so you have a sense of how long it takes to get something like this off the ground, this has been 3 years in pre-development. From that initial conversation, which I think took place actually, so it's a little less than 3 years, but in the fall of 2019, it's taken till now to actually have plans, have everything pretty much in order, and ready to get shovels in the ground soon. Still not quite there. To get to that point, that means you have to have partners who are willing to go on a fairly long journey with you. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to commit to, because some of the partners have to have, they have other interests. So for instance, in our case, Samir Group has been with us from the beginning of this as well as our builder, and the individuals there, in particular, Chris Samir and Chris Haynes, have been central to putting in hours and hours, at this point, hundreds of hours without exaggeration, of in-kind support in their own time and their expertise in helping to bring this together. Something that we don't have at CareBridge, as much as we're the landlord and owner operator of many affordable housing units across the county. We don't build buildings. So we need that expertise, but we also need it in a way that understands the project and what we're trying to achieve. We needed other people like an architect, planners. We need a CareBridge, if it's not CareBridge, in the case of looking at this, because it's not always necessarily going to be CareBridge. In Lanark County, there's pretty limited, but it's not fundamentally just limited to us or the county. And then you need supporting partners. So supporting partners like the municipality. So where, as I described, some of the things that Smith Falls have done to make it a fertile space for this development, there's this continued commitment to seeing this through. They're not necessarily always sitting at our planning table specifically. It's always making sure that we have that very open, clear communication channel with the municipality around this project, so that when we do bring things forward and potential changes to the project, we have an open and very, I think, frank dialogue there. Donors, I already mentioned that too. You can't get this done, and I'm going to talk about money next. You can't get this done if you don't have other sources of revenue coming into this, and you need donors. You can't, CareBridge can't do it on its own. We don't have millions of dollars just sitting around in the bank to leverage as capital to get this kind of project done. We have put in some of our own capital, but we have limitations, as well as service partners. So part of building affordable housing is not seeing it just as a place to live, but it's how does it connect to the larger community? So a lot of the individuals who may live there will also need other types of connections in the community. And we want to make sure that as the sort of owner operator, we're not looking just at getting a building up and putting people in units, but we're actually looking at how will those people find proper supports in the community as well, so they'll be successful. Putting someone in an apartment somewhere is a good step, but it's fundamentally going to be undermined by other issues if you're not dealing with them, including things like ongoing mental health issues, ongoing substance use issues, ongoing financial issues. I mean, there are many things that bring, and health issues that bring people into problems in their lives. And if those aren't being dealt with, an apartment doesn't solve any of those problems. So we have, for instance, a partnership with Lanark County Interval House to help, and we've dedicated a certain number of those units to individuals who will be supported by the agency. So our exchange there is that CareBridge is saying, we as a landlord will make space for individuals who you're supporting, as long as you can commit to making sure that those people will be supported. So that's the kind of thing we also need. It's to see this building as not just a gated building on its own where people are living, and then we just kind of leave it alone. From there, we want to make sure those people have the supports they need. Not everybody's going to need the kind of supports I'm describing. Many of them will be perfectly fine and on their own and independent, but we want to make sure those who are at risk do have access to the resources that they need. Third area that I mentioned is money, and it's you may find it interesting. It's this far down the list, but if you don't have the first two pieces, then money won't get you there. Building a building in the capital to do so is great, but if you haven't done any of this other work, it's still not going to happen. And again, because this is not a profit-making venture, this is strictly about keeping to a fairly tight line. It means that it's only going to again be attractive in that larger context of people in terms of the development. If they have the vision for how this supports the needs of the community at a larger level. But all projects will require some level of financing and equity, and hopefully some grants as well. The National Housing Strategy, which is one of the largest sources of funding for these types of projects through CMHC, is a loans first program. That's great. And they also say, and CMHC, we've had a long-term relationship with them through almost all of our housing projects. In fact, I think all of them to a certain degree, except maybe a few smaller ones. But the fact is that they have been there for this, and we are very thankful for that. But as a loans first program, it means, although they say things like you can get up to 95% of the cost of putting this project together, you have to actually be able to carry that cost if you're taking it as a loan. If you do the math, which we have been, and as time has gone on and construction costs have gone up, rents have stayed kind of flat on the affordable side, not in the market side, but on the affordable market side, which is great because people's incomes have stayed pretty flat too. If not in reality, have dipped if you look at in real dollars. That means you have to actually be able to carry a mortgage. So same as your own houses, if you have them, you can't exceed your ability to pay for it. Well, if we're taking in rent from people who are paying affordable rents, plus with the supplements and the operating agreements we have with the county, that only adds up to so much. So we can not only actually, at maximum, for instance, in the case of this project, get about 30% of the project financed through CMHC. That means we have to find the rest of it elsewhere. So the county, through dollars that they have taken from a variety of areas of their own, and have also their own goals and vision for affordable housing, have cobbled together what I think is an amazing sum of money to help fund this project and give us the capital up front to get us moving, as well as an operating agreement that helps make this sustainable. Plus, as I said, we also have a donation of $500,000 from St. John's. And Carabridge has put in part of its own equity, and we bought the land that it's going on, as well as pay for other upfront costs to keep this project moving. So as you can see, it's not a straightforward go to the bank, and I'm not sure, I don't think any of you thought it was straightforward, don't get me wrong, but it is definitely complicated and takes time again for that to all come together too. And timing is key. The county and their ability to bring this more recent piece of funding together for us was really, if we talked about it a year ago, it wasn't there. It's there this year. So again, all of these pieces have to come together. And then one of the things that you need to know is that as a housing advisory committee is that homelessness looks quite different in our part of the world, in rural and small town environments or town environments. It doesn't look the same, so it doesn't get the same level of attention. And so went from large funders, even like CMHC, which I've had direct conversation with them, and they said, yes, we understand. It's different in the rural context, and we definitely need to pay more attention to that. But it's really hard to compete with what I would consider to be a much more visible problem in large urban centers. When you have people on street corners and you have them overflowing basically into the streets, and it's clear that the issue is there. For us, what it means is people are suboptimally housed, or they're couch surfing, if you will, or they're not sitting on necessarily street corners, and it's not as visible, but that doesn't mean the problem's not there. And I think the biggest problem is people being precariously housed. So they might have a roof over their head right now, but that roof is not the right roof for them. So we have, for instance, older adults and homes that are becoming dilapidated and are huge risks to their own health because of stairs and mobility issues and so on. And I won't go on about that. But my point here being is that a lot of the more strategic and targeted funding initiatives that have come along in the last few years, like the Rapid Housing Initiative, have really all gone to large urban centers. So it's hard for us to compete for those. And to be clear why that's so important is those were grants for first programs, up to potentially 100% of the value of your project. So that's something that that's a challenge specifically, not just for not-for-profits, but and in sort of less urban centers, but for our end of the world as a whole. And something to think about as a group is how you might advocate with bodies like CMHC to make sure they're paying attention to the rural settings. AMHO is a good place as an example. That's not CMHC, but with the province to advocate for that. At a national level, it's definitely worth getting on the radar with CMHC. We do have representatives who serve our area specifically, and we have, again, very positive relationships with, but it couldn't hurt for them to hear from more individuals than just the actual providers like ourselves. And I think to me, that's going to summarize the sort of the main challenges that we have. And again, nothing in there that you probably went, oh, I would have never thought of that. But it's that picture together that it does all hang together. And again, there's nothing magical about this. That it's kind of like what people say, oh, how do you stay so healthy? And you say, well, a good diet and exercise. No one wants that answer because it's unpopular. The unpopular answer here is that it's complex, it takes time, and the money's not just streaming in for this kind of thing. So we're happy to have this project of 44 Chambers pretty much on the brink of ready to go, but it's one of those overnight successes, right? It took 3 years for that overnight success. Anyways, I'm open to questions or anything else I can add.
Thanks, Rob. I'm sure there'll be a number of questions, and I'm just going to start with the first one because of course, sitting on Community Services Committee at County Council, I was there when your funding request came in. But I guess one factor that made that a reality was that you were essentially shovel ready.
Yeah.
So in order to line up, if you don't mind just take a moment to talk about maybe you had already applied for RHI funding twice, but I think that whole experience enabled you to be prepared for what came next.
That's a really good point. I mean, that funding was only possible for us from the county because, exactly as you said, we were shovel ready. So that meant we had to essentially be at a point, and going through the RHI process or the Rapid Housing Initiative process is that it's quite complicated and very detailed. So that means we had to have our, the full architectural drawings, the full engineering, the Class C budget for the project, all those things that make it ability to go tomorrow, essentially, if the money arrives. So that will be a challenge for many if they're just in the idea phase. Those trains can leave the station before you can hop on them, if you will.
And you had to invest in dollars to prepare for that, and also get outside help, I guess, in order to do that. So the amount of legwork ahead of time just to be prepared for that was considerable.
And that's where the partnership piece comes in. So CareBridge in itself had put out our own investment in keeping this moving financially was probably about $500,000. But I talked about the time, for instance, that we have and help from. We've had help with the Samir group that we're working with on the building side. That hundreds of hours that they put in are central to that, because that having that kind of investment in this, it was essential to being able to be shovel ready, and knowing the right people and who to pull in and how to get what we needed to actually be there. But that was all, as you say, Sean, it's a good point. we had to be to that point, which did require some upfront financial investment as well as a lot of people time.
Thank you. Now, Lorraine has a question and Courtney's a question in the chat as well.
Well, I just want to thank you, Rob, for coming today, and thank you for all that you do. We're looking forward to Chambers Street being completed, and it's something we very much need. And I know I speak for all my council members that we're looking forward to seeing that finished, and look forward to watching and cheering you on. I just wondered if you could tell the committee how many involved communities has Cahir-Bridge worked with?
Do you mean municipality?
No, you're in Almont. I know you've worked here before, but are there other communities that you're involved in right now doing the same kinds of projects?
No development projects like this at this point. We have some conversations that just started with Mississippi Mills as an example, but we're at the phase in Mississippi Mills where we were 3 years ago with Smith Falls. So as an example, that's likely a few years away before we actually see a development there. We have had ongoing discussions with Carleton Place as well, but part of what's been missing there, just to be honest, is that there hasn't been the same kind of groundswell from around the municipality and the other tables that will help get that off the ground, if you will, at this point. But that primarily right now, it's just Mississippi Mills and in Smith Falls. Most of our housing right now is in the Mississippi Mills area, so in the Almont and Pakenham area, if you don't include the housing we have for developmental services, which stretches sort of across the county. We have the only housing we currently have in the Smith Falls area is specifically for developmental services.
Thanks. And can you address Courtney's question?
Yeah. So just to be clear, current rents aren't affordable. If you're just talking about market rents, what I was referring to is our rents are through our operating agreements that we have with the county are kept to an affordable level, which means that some of them are considered RGI or rent geared to income, and some of them are considered individuals have what are called rent supplements. And there's a new thing called the portable benefit, which you probably heard as part of this committee. So there are different ways that people can have their rent made affordable. So the level we need to get to, which is sort of prescribed by the agreements we have with the county, as an example, is about $600 for a one-bedroom apartment. As you know, right now, if you were to go to rent a one-bedroom apartment in the county, pretty much anywhere, you're getting well over $1,000 and as much as $1,500. So ours are definitely still considered affordable. And some people I know pay as little as, say $70 a month. That's their financial contribution. The rest of that's made up by the county, as an example, or other sources, but primarily the county.
Courtney, happy with that answer, I guess. Any further questions for Rob? Yeah, Ellie?
This isn't related exactly to what you're speaking of, but it touched a little bit in regards to knowing the right people and collaboration and how that works. I'm wondering, we're talking about, the not-for-profits role in the development of affordable housing, but what do you think, would be the role to advocate for affordable housing, from the federal or provincial government to kind of support? Because I think we're all well aware that, the not-for-profits can't do it on their own. So what kind of role or, collaborations do you see in which we can, advocate and kind of support in that sense towards provincial and federal government?
Great question, Ellie. I'd say it's very along the lines of what I was saying in terms of advocacy, especially with the at the federal level with CMHC, because they are the major holder of funds right now for affordable housing. There's some coming through provincial levels, but a lot of that is actual national to provincial, to the hands of the, potentially even then in the county, to us, kind of thing. It wouldn't hurt if they heard more from groups like this that don't forget about the more rural settings outside of the large urban environments, because the issues here are still quite challenging, and it just looks quite different. So that's part of what they need to help them understand it. But as an example, in the last RHI round, they they wanted to focus on very specific priorities. Part of the problem is, though, is that those priorities were not necessarily communicated to the people applying until after we applied. So if we knew that in advance, we probably would have spent more time saying, should we apply? Because you want to focus here. So a little bit more clarity in how they want to, use these dollars wouldn't hurt either, in terms of advocacy and how much are they going to commit. So we have a conversation like that would actually be quite helpful. And I think there are other groups who would be similarly inclined. So it wouldn't just be this committee, but other committees or other like groups in smaller areas that do need equal attention, that would be, I think, happy to spark a larger conversation. We'd obviously be happy to play a role in something like that too. But it always looks kind of self-interested if the provider is actually leading the charge, if you will.
Yeah,
Well,
I know. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, no, thanks. I think that's like a good thought. I'm wondering, as a committee, kind of where our, I'm hesitant to do surveys and research proposals and stuff like that, just because those do cost money, and I think the money should be going towards rent supplements or housing. So, does, a committee like us play a role in more so, live stories or, letters to the editor, or, that kind of aspect, or where, can we kind of focus our energy, in your opinion, without, I appreciate the need for data analytics and numbers, and there isn't any in regards to rural and remote homelessness. I think we all know that. But without, taking away funds from actual housing, especially when we're in such a crisis, I don't know if that's something we're interested in as a group. How do you see collaborators, like CareBridge, Interval House, us, in that regard? Because I do know it's difficult in regards to like writing letters of support, because you have to make sure that everybody is able to sign on, right? And it can become very political. So I'm wondering, do you see that as a space for CareBridge, or as a community organization, or as us as a housing task force, or affordable housing committee?
As a committee, I think you actually hold a fair amount of influence, in that you're coming together as a representing a variety of perspectives. So I believe if you were to even just invite the local CMHC representative into a conversation, just to say, look, give us some guidance on how we can increase our portion of the pie for when it comes to affordable housing development, especially on the grant side, because again, the loan first part of it is challenging, a challenging component. But I think that a good starting point might be just to invite them in and have a conversation. My experience is that they've been very open to that, and very open to coming and chatting and having fairly frank dialogue with them. So our relationship, as I say, has been quite positive. It's just the way things are structured currently, it makes it more challenging for our end of the world to get the attention that it needs. And it's not because of any one individual that's sort of stopping that. It's policy gets set at a very high level, and it takes a while to influence policy like that. So starting with a conversation and saying, who should we talk to next and who can we bring in? We have a newly elected MPP, John Jordan, who's quite in touch with our communities, and might at a provincial level, because that's not CMHC, might be a good place to start as well to have this conversation. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of people arriving at his doorstep pretty quickly, but he might be a good inroads as well to talk who should we be talking to about this issue at a provincial level, and maybe help facilitating that in some way.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And I think that's important to note, right? Like, who should we be talking to? Because sometimes you can't have too many cooks in the kitchen as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Thank you.
No problem.
Additional questions? Rob, I have another one. As you know, we've got 17 recommendations from the Housing Advisory Committee that we're implementing, and we're hopeful that all will play some role in developing more affordable housing in our community. And I think obviously the one that makes the biggest difference is the potential partnership with not-for-profits, and you guys are the living example of that. Because we're not a housing provider ourselves, we're relying on the county, of course, as our housing authority. We have a shared services agreement and a commitment there, and we pay our share to the county, but ultimately the county has a broader responsibility as well. And as much as we appreciate the need for more housing across the county, we are focused on Smiths Falls, and the development of Chambers will be very meaningful, but we could probably fill 10 of those tomorrow.
Yeah.
So understanding the length of time it takes to put these things together and the complexity, the partnerships, the dollars, we know we can't stop with one. And I guess, would you have recommendations, tips, suggestions as to what the town, the municipality should do or could do to try and ensure that we can form relationships or continue with relationships or new relationships that will lead to more developments in the future? So if you were in, I guess, if you're on council in Smiths Falls, what would you need to, how would you act and what would you do to try and make sure we can create more affordable housing going forward?
I think it's a good point, Son, because there's a lot that needs to be done, but it's not all at one level. So from a council level, I think you guys have taken leaps and bounds. Like, you're definitely in many ways light years ahead of others in, first of all, making a commitment to the issue, and then also looking at the various facets of what it takes to get a project done. Once it actually has some of those other elements that I'm speaking to. So a council that is ready to act and move at a fairly quick pace, because as an example with 44 Chambers, we've moved from an initial concept to where we are now, and we have things that are moving. So from a council level, it would be good to be focused on how do we free up or make sure that it's a low barrier environment to the creation of affordable housing. So that's not just all about, developmental charges, development fees, and things like that. It's also about approvals, being able to make sure that our planning departments and so on have the support that they need to be able to make to move quickly as well. We've not experienced any really significant delays in our work with Smiths Falls, but on the council side, I think the focus is, as these opportunities come along, be ready to move and be ready to help support them, and again, reduce the barriers to the project moving forward. So that is more of a conversation potentially, which we have had on an ongoing basis. And so I'd say there's a pretty optimal environment right now in Swiss Falls, but as a commitment moving forward, you know, this council is obviously very committed, but maybe there's a way of also ensuring that councils in the future are not going to then suddenly change tax, and then, you know, you want to make it probably difficult, I would say, for future councils to change tax and create a higher barrier environment for affordable housing. So maybe these commitments go beyond the existing council. But I think fundamentally, I would say we've had a very highly optimal or optimized environment for this development, and our relationship with municipality, with council, moving things very quickly and being very enthusiastic and supportive. It would be, as I said, the element that depends now on, you know, for instance, your leadership, with council's leadership, with, you know, the support of the actual municipal staff. But it would take a lot for that to turn in another direction if there wasn't that support at the political and municipal level. So maybe there's a way of helping to instill that in a way that doesn't shift or change over time based on the people who happen to be in those seats. I'm not sure how possible that is, but it wouldn't be a bad thing if people were sort of, this commitment could be guaranteed across individuals, including myself and Jeff and everyone who's sitting here. It'd be good, you know, in a number of years, that when the other people are having this conversation, they'd say, I'm really glad that this has been channeled and clearly identified, and we're not to waver from this and keep it moving that way. But I think you guys are doing pretty much everything that I could think of from a municipal level, because as you said, it's not in the municipal budget to be a municipal housing provider or even funder necessarily. It's just not there. So that's not going to be one of the things. So again, not to be too repetitive, but creating that low barrier environment and maintaining that would be key.
Thanks, Rob. Jeff.
You know, some of the work that we've been doing is identifying town-owned properties that might be suitable for affordable housing. And I think that work has to be ongoing, that you, any way you can, create a land bank so that property is ready to go when money is flowing. So you're not looking, you know, you're getting money, but you're having to find property. So earmarking property for affordable housing, I think, is something that councils can be doing.
Great point, Jeff. And maybe that means even a policy shift to the town potentially acquiring property that could be suitable for affordable housing, right? So, yeah, great point.
Sean, I just wanted to reiterate what Rob said in the beginning about the partnerships. You know, I remember those early days when you came forward, and for a group like CareBridge to get working on affordable housing, you need a fire that's happening in a community where, you know, that partners are willing to work at it and form those partnerships. Having St. John's on and bringing in Chris Shamur's group, they've been invaluable to the process here. They come with all the local knowledge that CareBridge may not have. They know the players. You certainly know the players, Lorraine. It's real. That's a really, really key spot. We do have municipalities that come to us, but they're not at that level of readiness where they know how to put it together. So this is an important meeting, having Rob here to mention that, and I'm sure that you can kick it out to some of those other communities to have a look at this tape, because that's a key element in getting going, is having a town ready to go.
Well, and I think the experience of what we learned over the last 3 years certainly has prepared us for the next development as well.
For sure. One other thing that just occurred to me is that there are other ways of getting affordable housing into the community that aren't about necessarily building a building. It's also looking at creative ways of using existing just, sort of existing capacity, if you will. So there are other interesting ideas in that area, and it does sometimes create a challenge to bylaws. So right now, some of those in some communities are challenging because it's hard to share space, as an example. So that's something to think about as well. So don't get too hung up completely on, projects like 44 Chambers, which is putting up a great, that's awesome, it's a building, but also looking at what other capacity there might be in the community. And I couldn't say what that looks like in Smith Falls right now, but in other communities, they're just starting to look at this as a how do you get more people into existing spaces in the community? I see Vicky.
Yeah, Vicky?
Yeah, I'm just curious because people are going to be relying on the county for rent supplements to be housed in the 44 Chambers, is it? Sorry.
Yep.
I know the exact building you're speaking of, the one that's building there. They're going to be relying on county supplements. I'm just curious what happens if the funding runs out, because historically almost every year it does.
Ours hasn't. The way we work with the county is we have ongoing operating agreements. And we've never had any shortfall on the county side. But it's because we have it's a very long-term relationship that we've had, but these agreements, they go over the course of, many, many years, many decades, actually. And so we have some certainty there that there will not be fluctuations in people's ability to pay their rent using that system, although there may be changes to the system over time around with affordable benefits and so on, which mean people have more control over who they pay rent to. But we're confident, to be perfectly honest, that there's not a ton of options. So we'll still be one of the probably top on the list of people's choices, but they may go elsewhere too. But that, on the whole, our operating agreements are pretty specific and pretty locked in, so that we ensure that we're not seeing fluctuations in our ability for people to have affordable housing over a long period of time.
The county does have a responsibility under the Housing Services Act to ensure it provides 771 units, RGI, rent supplements, affordable housing benefits. And so it has a responsibility. So as it loses, it's been losing rent supplements, landlords who are not willing to continue on when a tenant moves out, that impacts its ability to meet its minimum standards. And so, of course, the development for CareBridge brings the county back to its minimum standard level. So there is a regulatory environment that they have to maintain. And to your point, Vicky, it would be deeply concerning if all of a sudden those supplements were no longer there and people were forced to face higher rents. But fortunately, we've got provincial regulations which are requiring the county to maintain that as a minimum. And the 10-year housing homelessness plan has additional priorities going forward, from supplements to further construction. But still, there's one thing to meet the minimum, it's another thing to meet the demand. Additional questions? Looks like we're all done with Rob. Really good to be in here, and I mean, I'm obviously very familiar with this journey, but the complexities of it, the challenges, all the pieces that had to fit together, including the funding sources to make this a reality. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we could probably fill 10 of these developments tomorrow, and we need to ensure we do what we can to make sure that we get this one's going to get built soon. We're excited about that, but that there are more coming down the pipe. And so your experience today certainly helps us understand what needs to happen in the future to ensure that there are more developments just like this. Thanks for joining.
For having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And anytime you want me to drop in, feel free to invite me.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Take care, Rob.
All right. Take care.
Okay. moving on, next item on the agenda, Carl, just bring up an update on the zoning bylaw.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll make this quick. It's hard to follow up on Rob's presentation beforehand, but at the last meeting we had a discussion on a number of proposed zoning changes that are intended to accommodate the creation of housing and particularly rental housing throughout the town. So just a quick update on that. Based on feedback from this group as well as the Planning Advisory Committee, we proposed a few changes to some of the aspects of the draft bylaw, including establishing a provision now for requiring visitor parking spaces for larger residential units. We did hold the public meeting, the statutory public meeting a few weeks back. We received limited attendance at that meeting. However, since the meeting, we've received some substantial comments from the Economic Development Department as well as a resident. So we're staff and our consultant team are working through those comments, and in the next couple of weeks, we're hopeful to come back to Planning Advisory Committee with some new changes to the draft bylaw, where we'll be asking PAC to adopt a resolution in support of that, and then it would follow to a committee of the whole and eventually council. So the significant comments we've received in the last couple of weeks we'll be altering our overall adoption timeline. It doesn't look like it'll be ready for approval by June, but we're certainly hoping to have this on the council plate sometime this summer, and hopefully a new draft zoning bylaw that'll create a little bit more flexibility for a number of residential development types. Another quick update that I have is with respect to the community improvement plan. Our consultants at Dillon have completed their stakeholder interviews. They've interviewed a number of town department heads, developers, previous CIP recipients, as well as advocates for affordable, attainable housing and accessibility, looking to identify issues and opportunities to go into a new community improvement plan. So the consultants have developed an issues and options report that will be presented at the CIP evaluation committee meeting this evening. So that's something that will be live streamed. Also, it is available on the Speak Up Smith Falls webpage. On the portal there, we have a section for the CIP. So we'd encourage anyone in this committee and anyone watching at home, if you're interested, to go on to Speak Up Smith Falls. And the documents are available there, and there's an email address that you can always reach out if you wanted more information or to provide us feedback. So the first step, the first public engagement process has completed, but it is open-ended. We're always welcome for feedback as our consultants work through that process. So I'll leave it there for now, but I'm happy to report the progress on both of these items.
Super, Carl. Thank you. And any questions? No? Okay. Thanks again, Carl, and thanks for your deep involvement with the project of 44 Chambers. To Rob's point, it says it's been a very pleasant experience to work with yourself, the planning department, and bringing this project through. We have one piece of correspondence item. Town of Fort Erie bidding wars on apartment rentals. Have everyone had a chance to read through it? I don't know if there's any comments or thoughts. Looking to. Oh, Carrie's putting it up. And I guess it really comes down to the now therefore be it resolved. Both provincial and federal provincial governments enact legislation that prevents both open and closed bidding on both rental units and residential sales. And third, that both federal and provincial governments prohibit the sales beyond the list price, and further, this be circulated to Trudeau, Ford, etc. So I don't know if anyone has any comments on this. It part of course speaks to residential sales and the reality that many homes are going above asking price, and I don't think that's something that we really want to get engaged in. But I guess, and I'm not familiar with closed bidding on rental units. That's something that I've not seen before. But maybe perhaps for our next meeting, if you'd like, we got a number of reference points here. If we do a little bit more research into the possibility of closed bidding on rental units, if that's happening. I mean, obviously we would be very concerned that people are having to make blind bids on what they would pay for rent to get an apartment. We would definitely want to see some changes that would prohibit that practice. But if everyone's okay with that, I would suggest we park this for now. We'll do a little bit of research on that element of this, and if it is something that's happening in the province and something that's happening here, we'll bring that back for further discussion. Does that make sense? Nodding heads. Okay, thank you. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to open it up for a roundtable for any comments or questions or suggestions. Let's go with Lindsay first.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and maybe I would maybe put this to Vicky, because I know you're really engaged in this, but I'm wondering if you're seeing anything happening with the supply, well, maybe even price point of rental units right now. And I'm more so just curious because I've seen and I think a lot of people who buy right now are seeing a bit of plateau on pricing for real estate. And, you know, when that happens, it's a bit of an opportunity market for me. So I've been exploring quite a bit of things in town right now where I'm not having to compete against other bidders. And I just want to know if anyone's seeing adjustments happening right now on the price point of rentals, if that's correlating with where the market is, or if the two are kind of still looking like they're starting to separate, because, you know, prices were going up, rent was going up, prices are now doing this, but is rent still going up, or is it kind of doing the same thing? I'm curious.
Vicky, do you want to comment?
Yeah, it kind of what I was going to talk about. Rent prices are skyrocketing. They haven't changed. They're just going up. I have many people reaching out to me, ready to pitch tents, asking where they can. It's disastrous. Like, I've seen bachelors over 1,100, some 1,300. There's I think it's a 1-bedroom out in Carleton Place right now, brand new build, and it's for 2,500 or 2,800, 1 bedroom. Like, it's insane. I'm not sure really what we talked about how we want to keep people housed, and the best way to do that is keep them in their current home. I agree, because I'm now facing a situation where maybe in a week I might be out of here just because of affordability. So I'm really depressed, and I've been trying since the inception of this to really advocate for rent supplements and whatnot, because if you make too much on Ontario Works, you won't qualify for Ontario Works. It's depressing. It's sad, because I'll be in a tent soon too. I don't have family members that are able to accommodate me, or my family, that for that matter. And it's really depressing with how many people have come forward to me, just giving me their situations, and I have literally no answers. So that's pretty much where I'm at.
I'm sorry to hear that, Vicky. Obviously, you had another point you wanted to raise? No. Okay, I'm sorry. Lindsay?
Yeah, I think I hear that and I go, okay, obviously, you know, rent's just becoming super unaffordable, and there's so many issues that this committee unfortunately just doesn't deal with, right? Like, we can't our mandate isn't to talk to the government about the fact that there needs to be increases to, what people are receiving, what people can receive and still receive that support. There seems to definitely be, the government's very out of touch with things that were created in the 90s that haven't changed, and it's really disappointing. And so, while this committee isn't here to necessarily advocate for things outside of that, I'm also wondering, like, when do we start maybe looking at that in the town as a whole, to create some sort of discussion, because it does relate to housing and it does relate to a lot of other things. So I mean, it's really hard to hear, you speak, Vicky, and know that that's not only your situation right now, but everyone else's, honestly, or a large population. And it's, I like, even as someone who is trying as a developer in town, like I don't even know what to do either. But I do see like that, there is a bit of an opportunist market happening right now with being able to buy property that we're not having to overbid on finally, or at least compete pretty aggressively in. And I hope that helps create a little bit more affordable housing. Interest rates are obviously impacting what people have to charge, so too. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just like, maybe something else needs to be created to start advocating for the second hand of this. It's kind of two-part. It's housing and people's ability to like actually maintain a living given the cost of things right now.
Great point, Lindsay, and Vicky, you're sharing your story. The county's 2021 housing and homelessness report is just out. We're addressing it tonight at County Council. There's 187 households identified as homeless in Lanark County at the end of 2021. 100 of those in Smiths Falls. So there, as Robert mentioned earlier, they're not on the corner of the streets. We don't see them. They're the invisible homeless, but they're precariously housed. And as he mentioned, in many situations, probably not a safe situation, not a great situation. So it is deeply concerning, and probably, as you said, Lindsay, that when you look at where OW and ODSP payments are, where they've been frozen with the cost of living rising the way it has, as well as anyone who's been forced to change residence in recent years is facing significantly higher rent. I mean, one thing we can do is we can advocate. And this is a municipal conference in Ottawa in August. So 10% of our top population of Smiths Falls relies on ODSP. That's 5 times the provincial average. So it's a huge number of our citizens who are living on very modest income. And I think there's probably still 400 and some people on OW as well. So there's another roughly 5% of our population. So 15% who are living on very limited fixed income. So once we know who the new minister is, once the cabinet is sworn in, we can seek it. We have to apply for delegation, I think by the end of June, but we can seek a delegation with the minister. And what would help there, I think, is not just us asking, it's being able to tell the story and to help the minister understand and feel the impact of basically the current OW and ODSP rates and what that has on people. So I don't know how we get that understanding other than reaching out to the community and say, if you're willing to share your story with us, we'll make sure the minister hears that. Joanne and then Jeff.
I was just going to say, I think that we're going to start seeing an impact because interest rates are going up. So I think we are going to see an impact on the market for housing. It won't help for rentals because rentals are already at a ridiculous price. But maybe if we Rob was saying, maybe start talking to our new MP. And John Jordan is a very approachable person. So maybe, knock on his door sooner than later and saying only, hey, this is, and like you said, like over 100 people in Smith Falls from that report of 2021, you said? So that are in that predicament. And we know for a fact that there's more now and people are still struggling. And also, then we could talk about also Ontario Works, and Smith Falls also has a very high level of seniors. We don't just have ODSP and Ontario Works recipient. We have a lot of seniors that are living on just 2 pensions, and they can't make it either.
Great point.
I know this from doing the food bank deliveries throughout the pandemic, how our seniors are, and I've talked to you, Sean, about that too. The senior, it's pathetic to see our seniors, how they live.
Thanks, Joanne. Jeff?
Yeah, I just want to continue on, starting with Vicky and then Lindsay and then what Joanne was saying. I think we don't want to lose focus on the work that we have at hand, those recommendations. We need to keep shepherding those through. But I think that it's almost unfair to Vicky to be a point of contact for people that are in desperate situation. And it would be nice if we could have an agenda item for our next meeting where we talk about our mandate so that we don't lose focus of what we said we were going to do. But as Lindsay said, maybe further our advocacy. Rob's point about CMHC and at that higher level advocacy, I think we should be looking at. Monica Guido from CMHC would certainly come to one of our meetings and we can talk on that level. But I think we also need to be looking at how we can support people in the community on the ground that are ready to pitch tents. And if we could have that conversation. I'm a fortunate guy. I just spent a bunch of time in the UK. And while I was there, an issue they were dealing with, they've coined a term that I hadn't heard before, and that's energy poverty. And they just passed a big act there where they were taking a windfall tax from energy companies and putting it back into the community to help people. I was aghast to see how much our petrol prices had gone up in the month I was away here, and they continue to climb. So what they're saying in the UK is anyone that's paying more than 10% of their income on energy cost is energy poor. And I think that we've got people that are housing poor. We've also got people that are housing poor and energy poor. And that's always something that comes to the fore, especially in the winter. So having these deeper discussions about what is possible on the ground, and I know we can't save everyone, but we need to have those conversations about how we could be looking at those issues and maybe broadening the mandate of this committee.
Great point. And I did a conversation with a gentleman last week who's on a very modest fixed income, and his heating bill last winter, he fell behind very early, and there is no way he can catch up. So what's the way out of that when you're already not making ends meet each month, and all of a sudden you've got $2,000 in unpaid utility bills?
I know, it's crazy. I talked to my friends in London, and their energy bills went up 59%. It's going to come here, and it's already here. And I think that we need to wrap this all up together and have that conversation about how we can move forward.
Yeah. Now, fortunately, there are some programs through the county that can help to some extent with this, but there's a little bit of number of people that can help. Okay. Courtney, something in the chat. That'd be great. Please, Courtney. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for your participation today. We don't have another meeting date scheduled, but it will likely be 2 or 3 weeks down the road, I suspect, based on when Carl can circle back with some of the final reports. In the meantime, I guess as an action item, we can reach out to CMHC, and maybe Jeff, you can provide the contact details. and see if we can have our regional rep come to a meeting to help us better understand funding opportunities that exist through MHC for housing providers. In the meantime, I guess if, as I mentioned, I think we can seek a delegation with the minister, and I think we've got to do that before our next meeting. So if any of you have some, I guess, experiences that you can share or know people that have, if they're anonymous, just a first name and an initial possibly, I will compile the information and be part of my presentation to the minister, assuming we get a delegation. Okay, so thanks everyone. Oh, yes, Carrie?
Just two things, Sean, just for the minutes. Did you just note that Jeff Mills would contact CHMC or did you mention that, or did I catch that wrong?
Jeff could provide just the contact details
Okay.
for the regional rep, and maybe you could reach out or go ahead, Jeff.
I think it wouldn't hurt for us to have our ducks in a row before we invite them. I think we need to have a discussion at this committee about what the questions are, what the statements, what are the things that we want from that kind of a conversation with her. It won't be hard to get her in the room.
Okay.
But I think we need to have a conversation at our next meeting about what are some of the things that we want to put on the table for her, so that we make good use of her time and ours.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay.
Thanks. Vicky?
Just curious, for the first-hand accounts, do we want them like short, sweet, to the point, or like a full story of how the situation happened?
Be as detailed as needed. I can't be sure what the minister will read or understand, but I will. It'll help me form my narrative anyway. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for your participation as always, and we keep forging ahead. And I know many days it feels like we're spinning our wheels and treading water, but I think we are making progress, and that's thanks to everyone here committed to making a difference. So have a good afternoon.
Thank you.